Insurers prepare for the worst as winds from Hurricane Emily begin to brush the coast of North Carolina.
And investors brace for the latest reading on consumer confidence.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gail Buckner.
And I'm Doug Ramsey. Good morning. Coming up in the next half hour, Tokyo stocks chalk up another gain after the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both hit record highs on Monday.
Also ahead, the UAW gets down to business selecting Ford as its target to negotiate a contract covering hundreds of thousands of Big Three auto workers.
And in our cover story, bug versus bug, as scientists scramble to save millions of dollars in California crops. Those stories and Middle East peace talks take a major step forward after almost 2 years of negotiations. Details coming up on This Morning's Business.
Topping our news this morning, Hurricane Emily takes aim at the eastern seaboard. With parts of the Midwest still underwater after the worst flooding in a century, another natural disaster is set to hit this country. Thousands of people have boarded up homes and fled inland as Hurricane Emily gains strength and winds begin to brush over the coast of North Carolina. Landfall of the hurricane is expected later this evening. Maximum winds reached 100 miles per hour earlier this morning. Gusts are hitting 120 miles per hour. At some point, the hurricane is expected to shift to the north, so Virginia and other areas further up the eastern coast are also on alert. Doug?
Gail, also on alert, federal authorities in the insurance industry, they're wasting no time preparing for the fallout from Hurricane Emily, and with good reason. Wild weather patterns have caused an estimated $34 billion in damages over the past 4 years, and that figure is expected to climb. As Mabel John reports, insurance companies say they're more than ready for Emily's arrival.
It's too early to tell if Hurricane Emily will bear a similarity to Hurricane Andrew or even its cousin Hurricane Hugo, which ripped through South Carolina a few years back, but federal agencies aren't waiting to find out.
We have already pre-positioned people and supplies at Fort Bragg. Also, we have FEMA personnel in the State Emergency Operations Center working with that state director and the governor's office to provide technical assistance or whatever it may be.
Hot on the heels of the Midwest floods and a year after Hurricane Andrew, the costliest disaster in history, people in targeted areas have been ordered to evacuate and prepare for potential disaster. Nevertheless, the insurance industry says it's financially prepared to deal with any claims resulting from Emily.
We're looking at about $160 billion in capital base.
$160 billion. Despite being slapped with Hurricane Andrew, the LA riots, and the Midwest flooding just in the last 2 years, the insurance industry is probably in one of its best financial positions ever. Many credit the industry's place in the bond market.
It's about maybe 2/3 of their assets are in bonds. With the bond market rising, the companies were able to take the gains from the bonds, put them into surplus, and offset the losses.
However, although coffers may look healthy, insurance companies are cautious and continuously looking for ways to cut risk.
We are taking a greater look at the risks involved, whether people are preparing, having the building codes necessary so that the risks are less.
They really do have to take action because the potential for loss is pretty dramatic.
Because today's Emily could be tomorrow's $16.5 billion Andrew. Mabel Jong, CNBC.
President Clinton will be appraised of Hurricane Emily's progress during the day. Yesterday, Mr. Clinton had another storm to deal with, the growing opposition to the North American Free Trade Agreement. Donald Vandermark reports the president is caught between fellow Democrats who want to kill the treaty and Caribbean nations trying to get in on the action.
President Clinton met with prime ministers of 5 English-speaking Caribbean nations, each of whom fears free trade with Mexico will divert money and jobs away from their struggling economies.
So there is an urgency in the way we deal with development, and there's an urgency in the strategies that we pursue.
Specifically, the 28 CARICOM countries want the U.S. to include them in a similar reduction in tariffs, what their Washington representative calls a parity arrangement.
That a parity arrangement would gain NAFTA support, and that's what we would like to see happen.
The president is making no commitments, though he's promised to look into it.
I said today, I asked the ambassador for trade, Mickey Cantor, to look into this and see whether we can provide some assurances that there will not be a disadvantage to the Caribbean nations.
Caribbean and Central American countries have long shipped food and some raw materials to America. But the real growth export for them is apparel.
Next.
A sore point for organized labor, which has suffered huge job losses to low-wage foreign workers. If there's one issue that could tip the argument in favor of including the Caribbean, it would be the drug trade. CARICOM leaders argue their people will ship cocaine and marijuana if they can't ship food and clothing. Also, Caribbean countries do have a key ally in Sam Gibbons. He's second in seniority on the powerful Ways and Means Committee. The Florida Democrat wants free trade with Caribbean countries, though he'd phase in tariff reductions over a longer period of time. When it comes to hemispheric free trade, the stakes for President Clinton keep getting higher. Just as many of his own troops in Congress are fighting it, more and more American neighbors are supporting it. Donald Vandermark, CNBC, the White House.
The stakes in the trade battle are escalating. The Commerce Department reports that the U.S. trade gap in goods and services shot up to $34.4 billion in the second quarter. That's the worst in 5.5 years. Today, the Conference Board's survey of consumer confidence is expected to show that Americans grew slightly less confident about the economy's future in August, and that lack of confidence will likely be reflected in a government report on overall economic growth in the second quarter. The Commerce Department's first revision of the gross domestic product for the second quarter is expected to show GDP growing at just a 1% annual rate. That's compared to the 0.7% rate in the first quarter. Keeping the overall economy in check, a sluggish housing recovery. Despite the lowest mortgage rates in nearly 25 years, new home sales fell 5% in July, with consumers still reluctant to make big-ticket purchases.
Reluctant consumers are just part of Detroit's problem these days. The big three U.S. automakers have started negotiating a new 3-year labor contract. Yesterday, the United Auto Workers Union picked Ford as its target. As Scott Cohn reports, that means the union will focus its negotiations on Ford in the hope of winning a contract that will set the pattern for similar deals with GM and Chrysler.
The choice is widely seen as the path of least resistance. Ford is the strongest of the big three, the one with the most to give. And while there are still some big issues that separate the two sides, most notably fully paid health care, the union goes into this phase of the talks unusually positive.
Let's just get on with it, get it over with. There's no magic about midnight September the 14th.
At this Ford plant, workers were equally upbeat.
Ford's doing too good for us to strike right now. They're sinking millions in that assembly plant right now, so I doubt if we'll strike.
Ford campaigned to be the target, most recently with a contract offer that got good reviews from the union. The company's chief negotiator says being first gives the company a competitive edge.
I think anytime you are the first and have the opportunity to influence the pattern, it can be to your advantage.
The good news here at Ford is potentially bad news at General Motors. GM has indicated it can't afford the kind of agreement Ford is likely to negotiate, and that clears the way for a conflict. Analyst Arvid Jupi says GM will try to break the tradition of a pattern agreement and may have some success.
I'm not going to put General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler into the same three peas in the same pod. That day is over for the labor management movement.
But GM workers say they're determined to hold the company's feet to the fire.
I think whatever Ford can give, I think GM can give willingly and should be willingly.
Still, virtually no one sees any chance for the talks to collapse at any of the big three. The industry may be rebounding, but by all accounts, the recovery is still too fragile to withstand a strike. Scott Cohn, CNBC, Dearborn, Michigan.
When we return, a truce between Israel and the PLO offers a prospect of peace in the Middle East.
And with the London market back from yesterday's holiday, we'll check how the overseas markets are faring and look ahead to today's action on Wall Street. Stay right there.
This morning's business, sponsored by American Airlines. Something special to Europe.
A friendly smile, a warm hello, an extra hand when you're on the go. There's something special in the air.
Whether you're flying on business or pleasure, one airline makes you feel like you're something special. American Airlines, taking you to more places around the world than any other airline. With over 100,000 employees who believe you can mix business with pleasure.
It's a feeling everywhere. A special way to get you there.
It's a pleasure doing business with you.
On the next Entertainment Tonight,
Marilyn!
the search for Marilyn Monroe continues. 90210's Jason Priestley tells why he's desperately seeking Marilyn on screen and off.
There's a fascination that's been there ever since she was, at the height of her popularity.
Plus, she's doing more than solving mysteries. By casting Madeline Rue in Murder, She Wrote, Angela Lansbury's helping a friend fight a traumatic disease.
We wanted an actress of her stature, and we got it.
On the next E.T., the hottest from Hollywood, tonight at 7 on Channel 4.
When they brought the baby home, she was beautiful and perfect. They surrounded her with care and love. Nothing would harm her. But there was a terrible threat they couldn't see. Poisonous lead that hides in dust, in paint, in water. A child can eat it, drink it, even breathe it. 1 out of 6 preschoolers has high levels of lead in their blood.
Call 1-800-LEAD, FYI.
For a few simple steps that can help protect your child. Her parents acted in time.
You can too.
Talks aimed at ending the strife in the war-torn Middle East are set to resume in Washington today. Yesterday, there were signs of major progress. The Israeli cabinet voted to approve a plan for Palestinian self-rule on the occupied West Bank, a step toward ending 26 years of Israeli military control. While months of further negotiations will be needed to work out details, this represents the first significant development in the Middle East peace talks since they began almost 2 years ago.
Turning now to the world market action, Japan's Nikkei average rose almost 114 points overnight, and after taking Monday off, the London markets reopened today. British stocks surging to new all-time highs. Let's go to Felicia Taylor in London now for details on all the overseas market developments. Good morning, Felicia.
Good morning, Doug. Starting with share prices in Tokyo, where the market posted its 6th straight day of gains, with the Nikkei closing above the 21,000 level for the first time in nearly 3 months. Dealers attributed the positive tone to persistent hopes of a cut in Japan's discount rate, fueled by steadiness on the bond market. Expectations that today's meeting of economics ministers will produce some major policy announcements to help kickstart the Japanese economy provided further momentum as the Nikkei closed up 113 points at 21,026. It was a familiar pattern on the foreign exchange market, the Bank of Japan intervening to support the dollar, helping it to gain nearly half a yen from its New York close, ending at 104.18. In early European trade, the dollar was at that same level to the yen, down a fraction to the mark and off further against the pound. The London Stock Exchange was again setting record highs this morning. The FT 100 share index picked up from the closing high, posted ahead of the long weekend to hit a new trading high of 31.15 before falling back a little to stand up 5 points at 31.06. There's no major UK economic data out today, although the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank reported half-year earnings at the top end of expectations at around $1 and $3.25 billion. It's the first results since merging with the Midland Bank. And finally, on to the credit market. Trade was subdued, with attention now focused on Friday's U.S. jobless data, although sentiment for the long bond remained bullish. And that's how the international markets looked early on. Back to you, Doug.
Felicia Taylor in London. Thanks very much for that report. Gail.
Checking the market action here at home now, a worse-than-expected report on the housing market helped push bond prices higher and yields lower Monday. And as it has all summer, that sparked a rally in stocks. The Dow Industrial Average was one of the few not setting a new record yesterday. It closed up 3 1/3 points to just under 3644. But the S&P 500 added 1 1/3 to 461.90, an all-time high. Ditto the NYSE Composite, which rose 2/3 of a point, winners beating losers 11-7 with 194 million shares changing hands. Both of the secondary averages hit records, the Amex index gaining 1 1/4 to 456 1/4, the NASDAQ composite finishing up more than 3 points to 737 1/3. And the flood of money pouring into mutual funds that invest in bonds soared 22%, hitting a record $13 billion in July. The inflow into stock funds rose 5% to $9.7 billion. Well, those are the kinds of numbers that have started to make our regular Tuesday guest nervous. Hugh Johnson is Chief Investment Officer with First Albany. Good morning, Hugh.
Good morning.
What bothers you about the inflow of money we're seeing into mutual funds?
It's always a danger sign, I think, in the market when you see speculation in general, particularly when you see speculation by small investors. And I think this is sort of the functional equivalent. Small investors are moving in enormous amounts, in not only into the markets in general, but to the bond market in particular, by mutual funds. So it makes me a little nervous to see that kind of a surge in speculative activity.
Isn't there, though, a lot of cash still in those CDs and bank deposits where all this money is coming from, and therefore couldn't it still create flows over the next few months?
There still is a lot of cash if you check household balance sheets, and there's no question there is somewhat further to go. What I'm seeing sort of anecdotally is a slowdown in that appetite because, quite frankly, you know, small investors are pretty savvy investors as well sometimes. And I think they're as nervous as everyone else is on this enormous move up, particularly in the bond market. Stock market a little more subdued, but the bond market has had a real run on the upside. Makes people nervous.
It sounds like it ought to make people nervous, like as if the bond market has sort of discounted all of the good news.
I think so. And I think we've got good news for the bond market coming next year and a slower economy, as you know. I feel that way. Lower inflation, but you're right, Gail. I think that the bond market has discounted that. So if we get a little bit of a pickup in economic activity in, say, the current quarter or the next quarter, or we get an uptick in inflation, that could be the news that's the catalyst for a pullback in bond prices, a rise in yields. I think that's coming. I think it'll be a buying opportunity, but I do think it's coming. So I think it's a dangerous point in the bond market right now.
All right, Hugh, thanks a lot. Have a great weekend. Hugh Johnson with First Albany.
Taking a look at some stocks to watch this morning, published reports say the oil industry would have to dole out a minimum of $166 billion over 20 years to meet current and new environmental standards. At the same time, consumers would have to ante up $18 billion a year more for petroleum products by the year 2000, that according to a 2.5-year study by the National Petroleum Council. Another study, this one by the Pentagon, contains some good news and bad news for defense contractors. The Washington Post is reporting today a 6-month study by the Defense Department to be released tomorrow will recommend scrapping a $90 billion bomber project with Grumman, but would probably continue with McDonnell Douglas's C-17 program despite budget problems. Another winner, General Dynamics Electric Boat Division. It's expected to be chosen as the nation's sole submarine manufacturer. Finally, The Limited, saying after the closing bell Monday that it'll remodel or shut down about 360 stores by the end of 1995 as part of a restructuring. The retailer also plans a stock buyback of about $500 million, or about 6% of the company's outstanding shares. Limited shares gained 1 3/8 yesterday, closing at 23 5/8.
Well, coming up next in our cover story, scientists may have finally come up with an answer to rid California of the destructive white fly. Don't buzz off.
There's a 48-hour stretch between Friday and Monday when everything seems a little easier. Generation gaps are smaller. Meetings become get-togethers. And with some luck, even the rainy weather takes a couple days off. To help you enjoy it, Alamo is offering weekender rates on any economy car with unlimited free mileage, which makes it easier to spend the weekend somewhere you've never been before, doing something you'll remember forever.
This simple outside says inside you'll find a lasting commitment to performance. The Intel 486DX2 processor, power for today's hottest software, and the Intel Pentium processor for the next generation of compatible power. That's Intel, the computer inside.
Talk of the town. Michael Jackson under criminal investigation. Channel 4 News first to bring you the exclusive story. And Channel 4 has been in the forefront of straight investigative reporting.
Whether the DA actually will file criminal charges against Michael Jackson is far from certain.
We have obtained an exclusive interview.
Authorities are finally ready to hear Michael Jackson's side of the story.
As the story develops, count on complete coverage from Channel 4 News to bring you the latest. When it happens on the Channel 4 News.
An exclusive peek at Jackie O's romantic summer getaway. While she and her millionaire boyfriend cruise the bay off Martha's Vineyard, Caroline and the kids whoop it up at the beach. It's the Kennedys' summer vacation. Then, she was sentenced to life in prison for murdering her daughter. Now, new evidence points to another suspect, the family dog. A mother's nightmare on the next hard copy.
Tonight at 7:30, only on Channel 4.
In our cover story this morning, the Golden State's do-or-die battle with the dreaded whitefly. California farmers are entering the third year of their war with the strain B sweet potato whitefly, a pest that has already devoured millions of dollars worth of crops in the nation's winter salad bowl. But now, as Jerry Cobb reports from Brawley, California, scientists are wielding a new weapon against the whitefly, which might help turn the tide.
Walk into any field in the Imperial Valley and you'll see the destructive work of the whitefly.
And this is the lint of the cotton, and the stickiness honeydew soot from the whitefly gets on this lint, and they cannot gin it properly.
Here in the nation's winter salad bowl, the whitefly has destroyed some $300 million worth of crops in the last 2 years, devastating the local economy. Since the bug is resistant to pesticides, scientists have been assembling and releasing armies of natural predators of the whitefly, like this tiny ladybird beetle.
It basically consumes individual whiteflies by chewing into the insect and then extracting its body fluids.
Another mercenary in this battle of pest versus pest is a tiny parasitic wasp native to the Nile Delta. It kills the whitefly by laying its eggs in the bug.
Traditionally, in many parts of the world, growers rely on naturally occurring biological control to keep their pest problems under control without having to use other methods.
If researchers here are successful in eradicating the whitefly by using natural predators, it will be a big endorsement for the use of non-chemical alternatives to pesticides, which are becoming less and less effective against bugs, which are becoming more and more resistant.
We grow over 100 different crops in this valley, probably of which 90% of them are attacked by whitefly. And so I think what we're looking at here is being able to prove that biological control can work over a wide area and over a wide number of different species of plants.
But perhaps the biggest challenge to agriculture officials is convincing farmers here the strategy will work.
Farmers take a while to change. If something's working, we usually stay with what works. And so with the biological control, I think we're beginning to see results, and it won't be long before we're going to be moving in that direction.
But time is running out. Prevailing winds have already blown the whitefly into the neighboring San Joaquin Valley, which is why growers and scientists here are rapidly deploying their armies of predators in the fields before the whitefly can do further damage. Jerry Cobb, This Morning's Business, Los Angeles.
Still to come, a recap of the business headlines, plus who'll win the battle of late night. Only the ratings can tell. More when we come back.
This Morning's Business, sponsored by Stouffer Hotels and Resorts, recognized for dependable quality and service with locations in the mainland U.S., Hawaii, the Caribbean, and Mexico.
I want my kids to grow up in a healthy environment. I want them to breathe clean air. I'm for nuclear energy because it doesn't burn anything. It produces no air pollution, no greenhouse gases. In fact, it's one of the cleanest sources of electricity we have. When I was in college, I was against nuclear energy, but I've reached a different conclusion. It means cleaner air for this planet.
It just opens up a whole world of opportunities.
It is a state-of-the-art way to make money today.
Introducing Investors Business Daily. It's the new voice in journalism, edited for America's business and investment community.
It's helped me make a lot of money.
Get 10 issues of Investors Business Daily, plus the audio cassette How to Make Money in Stocks, absolutely free.
It's a no-lose proposition.
It's an invaluable asset. Call now. The cassette and the issues, a $25 value, are yours free.
How can you refuse something that's going to educate you, hopefully make you money, and you're going to give it to somebody?
You'll get business articles, graphs, and tables you won't find in the Wall Street Journal.
The paper provides information that obviously you can't get anywhere else.
It gives you a clearer direction of where the market is heading.
I recommend it to anybody who has an interest in the stock market.
Call now. Get 10 free issues and the tape, a $25 value, free.
It's the only paper that has ever made me money. Serious money.
Without the Investors Daily, people are going to have a very difficult time being successful.
Menendez, the trial.
This is a tale of murder. The defense wants to show the brothers killed their parents after years of physical and sexual abuse.
Prosecution rested its case against the Denny beating trial.
Angeles now getting ready for another very big trial.
Opening arguments heard today in court as the emotionally charged Reginald Denny.
Demonstrators marched outside the courthouse demanding justice. The biggest court cases in the Southland. Channel 4 News brings you every detail every day. When it happens here, it happens on the Channel 4 News.
Now, nearly 5,000 Californians die of breast cancer every year, but monthly self-breast exams lead to early detection and cure. Channel 4 is offering a free do-it-yourself breast exam shower card made of durable plastic with easy-to-read instructions. For your free copy, send a legal-size self-addressed stamped envelope to KNBC TV, Burbank, California, 91523.
In People News today, gentlemen, start your wisecracks. Last night marked the debut of The Late Show with David Letterman on CBS. Both CBS and NBC, Letterman's former network, ordered flash ratings of viewership. They're expected at noon today. The fight for late night is worth an estimated $700 million a year in ad revenues. Roger Ailes, a political consultant and television producer, was named the new president of NBC's new talk network on cable, as well as CNBC, which produces this broadcast. Ailes is presently producer of The Rush Limbaugh Show. The president and CEO of Visa USA is leaving to pursue other interests. Robert Heller was widely expected to move into the top slot at Visa International. The world's largest credit card company has more than 309 million cardholders worldwide.
Now for a final recap of the business headlines this Tuesday morning. Another rally in the bond market, sending the yield on the 30-year Treasury to a record low 6.11%, pushing some of the broader stock averages to all-time highs. The S&P 500 up 1 1/3 points. NASDAQ Composite up 3 1/3 points yesterday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also added 3 1/3 points, but closed about 9 points below its record high. On world markets, Japan's Nikkei average jumped nearly 114 points overnight, and British stocks are higher, trading in record territory in London this morning. Today, the Conference Board is scheduled to release its Index of Consumer Confidence for August. It's expected to show a slight decline. The housing industry is suffering from that lack of confidence. Americans bought 5% fewer new homes in July, despite mortgage rates at their lowest levels in more than 2 decades. The United Auto Workers Union, meanwhile, has picked Ford as its strike target and will begin intensive negotiations with the number 2 automaker on a new 3-year agreement to replace the contract that expires on September 14th.
From this morning's Off the Wall Street file, want that promotion or new job? Try looking marvelous. According to a German study, no matter how much of a genius you are, if your clothes are out of fashion, you're overweight, or have a round face, the first impression others have of you is you're a loser. People are judged to be more intelligent if they are in shape, have a stylish haircut and clothes, and wear a friendly, confident expression. So when all else fails, fake it.
I'm smiling. And that's it for this edition of This Morning's Business. I'm Doug Ramsey.
And I'm Gail Buckner. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.
Viacom.